All right, ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. This meeting will come to order. Welcome. This is the regular meeting of the Land Use and Transportation Committee. My name is Malia Cohen, and I am the chair of this committee. And to my right is Supervisor Scott Wiener, who is vice chair, and to my left, and who will be joining us shortly, will be Supervisor Kim. And also want to recognize we have a guest with us, our friend and colleague, Supervisor David Campos. Our clerk is Mr. Victor Young, and I'd like to recognize Jennifer Lowe and Jim Smith, who are our techs helping us broadcast this committee meeting. I also would like to ask the clerk to make any announcements at this time.
Yes, please silence all electronic devices. Completed speaker cards and copies of any documents to be included as part of the file should be submitted to the clerk. Items acted upon today will appear on the September 29, 2015 Board of Supervisors agenda unless otherwise stated.
Thank you very much. Mr. Clerk, could you please call item number 1?
Item number 1 is the ordinance amending the Public Works Code to provide that floodwater management projects that are located within public right-of-way requiring a minor encroachment permit and funded by San Francisco Public Utilities Commission grant funds are exempt from payment of public right-of-way occupancy assessment fees.
Wow, that's a mouthful. Thank you very much. Supervisor Campos, would you like to make any opening remarks?
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. Thank you to you, Supervisor Wiener, Supervisor Kim, for hearing this item. I represent District 9, including an area of the Mission which has been dealing with the issue of flooding for quite some time. The legislation before you is a simple amendment to the code so that it's specifically to the Public Works Code so that small businesses and property owners who are in these flood-prone areas and they make changes to their properties, it addresses the issue of them not having to pay a fee, which has been the case up to now. This amends the code in such a way that if a property owner is doing floodwater management work with the assistance, financial assistance of the San Francisco PUC, including grant funds, they will not be charged a public right-of-way occupancy assessment fee should they encroach into the sidewalk as they do that work. Just to give you a little bit of background, on March 19th of this year, we held a hearing on the issue of flooding at the intersection of 17th and Folsom, which is in my district, actually the lowest point geographically of the city. This has been a flood zone for many, many years. During that hearing, we discussed with the PUC and community a number of ideas and ways to address the issue of flooding, and we actually developed from that hearing a working group. And two ideas actually came out of that working group, and those are the ideas that are moving forward. One is to customize the PUC flood grant program to meet the specific needs of the local businesses and residents, which is actually something that the PUC is doing, and I'm grateful to our general manager and his staff for all the work they're doing. And then the second idea that came up was this issue of a fee waiver, waiving fees if those projects involve a minor encroachment. And of course, the PUC in my office has been working with the property owners in this neighborhood to make that happen. And when you look at this is just commonsensical. Exempting these projects from annual fees will make it easier for small business and residential tenants to persuade their property owners to actually apply for grants from the PUC. It will also incentivize the floodwater grant program to encourage property owners to lower the risk of damage, harm, and storm events. And finally, it will help ease the administrative burden that we currently have on the PUC when people who participate in the program that they're running, that they're funding, have to go through this process. And let me give you an example. And we actually have here Chris Hickey, who's in the audience. He is a small business owner, property owner in this area. And as he can explain to you, as he was trying to address the issue of flooding, he was actually charged and assessed by the city an encroachment fee of $2,200 per month And this is a fee that the city was charging him essentially to fix a sunken sidewalk in front of the property, which he was trying to raise to the original level. I want to say that the PUC actually worked with Chris Hickey, and most of that fee was eventually waived. But we don't need to have a situation where property owners actually have to go through this process to make it happen, which is why this piece of legislation is here. I'm proud to say that the legislation was received very well by the Small Business Commission, which unanimously supported the legislation, and I hope that you will support it today. I'd like to thank again the PUC staff for working on this, also the Department of Public Works for their support around this legislation. And I especially want to thank the small business owners and residents in my district, of this neighborhood in particular, who have been volunteering the time to work with us to make this happen. I also want to thank Carolyn Goosen in my office, who has been spending a great deal of time on this very important issue. So with that, unless you have any questions of me, I'd like to ask Kathy Howe, who is the Assistant General Manager for Infrastructure of the San Francisco Public Utilities Commission, to say a few words. And again, Kathy, thank you and your staff for all the work you've done.
Thank you, supervisors. Just to give you a little background, the SFPUC developed the Floodwater Grant Program in 2013 to encourage San Francisco property owners to make improvements to their properties in a way that would lower their risk of damage in rain-related flooding events. Interest in the grant program has increased for several reasons. One, several major storms caused flooding last year. The grant program was recently expanded to better benefit the constituents and there's been focus on a widely anticipated El Nino. And Supervisor Campos already gave an example of the encroachment, but another example is if a property owner wanted to put a removable barrier in front of their house, and the barrier frame was anchored to the building, but it protruded over the sidewalk, they would also be assessed a fee. And the current code would require the permit for minor encroachment and payment of an annual fee that goes into perpetuity. So every year they would have to pay this $2,200 that Mr. Hickey was paying. And so our grant program can only reimburse eligible capital project costs, but it can't reimburse for annual fees. So the proposed amendment to the Public Works Code would still require a permit, but it would just waive the fees. And so passing this legislation would extend the incentive of the Floodwater Grant Program and would further help the property owners reduce their risk of damage from storm events. Thank you.
Colleagues, are there any other questions? If not, I can go to public comment at this time. Okay, seeing none, let's open up public comment. I've got a few comment cards. I will call folks up. We have Hans Art, Malcolm Davis, Chris Hickey, Andrew Yip. Please come on up. You'll have 2 minutes to speak. You'll hear a soft chime indicating that you'll have 30 seconds left.
Thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Hans Art. I've been fixing cars on 17th and Folsom for about 36 years. I'm Chris's neighbor, and I urge you to ratify this amendment. Thanks very much.
Thank you very much. Next speaker.
I'm Chris Hickey. I'm the person who had that fee assessed against me. I moved into the neighborhood 3 years ago. My building flooded twice in the first year, so in talking with the city, I figured it was going to take an awful long time to fix the problem, which ultimately we need to get done. And so I decided to embark on myself. I have an 18,000 square foot footprint, so I raised my ground floor slab back to its original height, and also the sidewalk. It cost almost $1 million. And it really works. It protects the building. But in doing so, I guess the sidewalk on either end got raised a little bit, and it slopes. And so because of that, there was an easement fee, an encroachment fee of this $2,200 a year. And I didn't even know that was coming. I was kind of shocked when I saw that. And, you know, like no deed goes unpunished, it seemed. But thanks to the help of the public utilities and Mr. David Campus, we were able to get that waived, because that's a huge thing. If you times up by 10 years or 100 years, I mean, that's a lot of money. But ultimately, what we really need to have done is to fix the problem once and for all. And, you know, I'd like to see if we could put some pressure in getting that done in the long run. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your comments. Next speaker, please.
Hi, my name is Malcolm Davis. I own a building at 17th and Folsom called Stable. We've had numerous floods. I'm hoping that this legislation will get passed. I think it's a worthwhile part of the process. But I would like to say I'm very disappointed that this is being portrayed as like the solution to the problem. This isn't a solution. This is just one more Band-Aid. Like, we have a serious flooding problem, and now the plan is there's going to be a park built, which is going to make the flooding worse because the park is actually elevated above the street level. So now the flooding is going to go farther down the streets, all the way down to Rainbow Grocery. And I just think this is incredibly short-sighted. I think the piece of legislation is a good idea, but I think the attention that this problem is getting is not satisfactory. When we had a meeting in March, we talked about 3 steps to the problem. There was going to be a short-term solution, mid-term solution, and a long-term solution. All we're talking about right now is fixing the code. We're not even talking about fixing the problem. Like, I just think it's ridiculous. Like, the park that's proposed there, its environmental impact report did not consider flooding. The park's supposed to start construction in January, and there's no plan for putting any sort of storage or retention underneath it. The city owns the parcel of land that used to be a marsh. The city could restore that to a marsh and make the problem go away. But that's not the way the city works, apparently. So that's my piece. Thank you.
Thank you for your comment. We'll try to get some answers to your question. Stick around. Next speaker.
Good morning, Conference Officer Michael Han, Jane Kim, Dick Campos, Savina. In Chinatown, right now, for the past few months until continuing, on Stockton Street, from Sacramento all the way to Jackson, it's full of this besides all those the transit construction site. They create lots of construction machine equipment parked all along the way and taking on the pathway. I mean the pavement everywhere. I don't know if it's truly necessary. I mean, other than we're not concerned about the financial aspect of such a construction, but it seems like too much of a construction happening in Stockton, Chinatown. I wait for my girlfriend every morning, stand by the corner of Washington and Stockton. So I mean, I don't know about all this background, of the construction equipment machines, but seem too much of them, just too much.
Thank you. Public comment is closed at this time. I'd like to invite Ms. Kathy Howe up to address one of the questions that she heard in public comment, directly, specifically. How does this code relate to
Supervisors,
problems?
we will be meeting with the community again in mid-October, and so we still are looking at short-term and mid-term and long-term solutions. It hasn't been dropped off the table, and so we'll be presenting some of those ideas in October.
Great. Supervisor Wiener.
Thank you very much. I want to reiterate the need to have some of these structural solutions. It seems, I know with 17th and Folsom, every time we have a rain event, it seems that there is a flood. I know in my district, in and around Cayuga, we had massive flooding last December, and there are people who still can't live in portions or all of their homes. And it is a structural issue that needs to be addressed, and I know sometimes there are significant costs involved, but I just wanted to express to the agency, as I have